Welcome back to the Unlocked Podcast that you can find on our website, unlockedpodcast.com, if you want to find out more information about us. But we are three business owners from North Carolina, Minnesota, and Canada. We have joined forces to create this podcast and this platform to really share our experiences. And what we're going to be talking about today is our failures, but our experiences around growing businesses in the locksmith and security industry, and with the real purpose of trying to share our insights, because we're all three trying to build businesses that outlast us, that are long-term, enduring, and so we want to just kind of share the concepts around what we're trying to do, maybe to inspire you, give you an aha moment, or maybe say, these guys are really crazy, and I'm just listening to hear what's
chat. Really crazy.
Really crazy.
Wow, that's harsh words.
Last episode, we started a topic around our three biggest failures. Mm-hmm. And currently I have 6 written down. Tony he just lost it because we took a break in the middle of the conversation so that we could start another episode.
He had to put more steam in his sauna. Was the problem.
He had to pour more water on the steam rocks. And
Lars, the sauna joke might be overused by now.
It's not. It's still
Never.
On par. Because if you looked on the video on YouTube, then you would see why we say that. Tony he's visibly upset right now. His arms are crossed, and he's
perturbed. He is perturbed. He's out of sorts, and it's amazing. Oh,
so my day has been made. So we'll get into. So all right. So we've all shared our first mistake that we've made in association with a win. It was a very confusing start of the conversation, but you can check that out in the previous episode. So now we're at it, and Tony is going to kick us off with his next
second screw up. Tony.
Yeah. No, actually, I don't like kicking this off because you seem to have an interesting story. I think my story is not as interesting as yours, and I can tag onto it. But Lars hinted at earlier today that he had an awful firing, and I'm just excited to hear about that. So let's start with you, Lars.
Well, okay. Thanks, Tone. So
yeah, it's not so fun, is it? Yeah, wonderful.
So for a loop here.
Back in my previous life, I was in a role that was involved with a lot of termination. So I've done that. And the advice I got
seems to be something you probably got joy out of. It was a good fit for you,
Tone. You're salty. Salty,
Sparky.
Tony's Sparky again. Can you turn down the heat in that sauna, because it's obviously getting to you here? But
the 5th Sparky week in a row.
I know. My God,
you guys have the effect on a nice Minnesotan.
Tony,
turn me into a monster.
I'm gonna have to text Uncle Glenn and let him know that you're getting a little out of sorts here.
Yes, and Alexis, I hope she's listening to this one, because that's why Tony gets a lot of the riff here. Because listen to how snarky he is over there.
Very rude right now.
Man, Tony, oh boy.
He's got those arms crossed again, too. He's just mad. Madder than mad.
Oh,
so I don't know what to do with them. I need to put them somewhere.
Yeah, your phalanges. So, I don't know. This was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it was after an acquisition. And, after an acquisition, you do a lot of calculations. You do a lot of understanding the people that are involved. Anyway, so we're in a situation where we did have to make some terminations. Sure. And, I was given the advice when I was younger, and I think Moneyball actually has something similar. I think Billy Bean says to whoever the fat guy is.
Jonah Hill.
Yeah, Jonah says, you either, would you rather have, 5 to the chest or 1 to the head?
Mm-hmm.
These are professionals. So keep it straightforward.
Wait, is that really what they say in the movie?
Yes. So these people are professionals, and just treat them like that, right? There's these long-winded conversations about, why it's not working. It's just like sticking the knife in. So I've always believed just very straightforward. So my process is easy. Anyway, so somebody, you come in, they sit down. First words out of my mouth is, we've decided to let you go.
Yeah.
We're going a different direction. So it's just 1 to the head. It's clear. It's cut. Here's HR. They'll deal with it. But I don't, it's a terrible situation no matter how you look at it. But I was always short, concise, to the point, these are the facts. We're not changing our decision. The decision's been made. We're moving on. Okay. And one of the other things I do all the time is, wait. Silence is okay. A lot of people get uncomfortable when there's silence. So, you factor all these
Especially
things
in a podcast. You don't want to have a bunch of silence in a podcast. It gets awkward.
Yes. So if we sit here and wait for Tony to think, for instance,
it gets awkward.
Yeah, it's dead air. So anyway, it was a situation where I went and
this
was
situation about being short and to the point is quite the opposite.
Is sitting there and had the conversation, and I was trying to go one to the head, and it was like the silence trick was reversed to me.
Oh boy!
And it was to the point where
card, hey?
I wasn't sure that they had heard me. And I was like,
"This is too silent."
Yeah, so I kind of stuttered and just repeated myself, and again, just more silence. Like what's going on here? Anyway, it was just like I was, and then I kind of looked at the person I was in there with. I was like, what? And then I broke my own rule. I started just kind of stammering and like, oh, you're like a good person, and we like you, and you do like everything that you're
not supposed to
do and say. It was just like I had read the book on the do not say list, and I was just like reading it word for word. I was like, what happened? And then I got out of there like I'd just gone toe to toe with Tyson. Like I was just beaten. I just stood up. I remember leaving and walking down the stairs, and I was like, what the hell just happened to me? Like this person just owned me in this situation by saying nothing. Just sat there and stared at me. Yeah. So, it was just like an awful moment for me, and the whole thing was just like, okay, I've got to be more prepared getting into these situations. Which is not easy for me.
Tony, you know what this reminds me of? You remember that time that we were sitting in a boardroom with Lars, and he gave us a presentation on broccoli, and everybody was just sitting there staring at him in silence, and he just kept rambling around.
Nonsense. No. The better part of that story was we're sitting at I think the baseball game or something, and I can't remember where it was, but Lars is like, Ben's like, are you ready for your presentation tomorrow? And Lars is like, what do you mean?
Oh, boy. Dude, it was not. It was the morning of.
Yeah, it was.
No, he spent the better part of the
Lars
morning.
Is sitting there at the beginning of the meeting for like the first couple hours working on his presentation, and he gets up there and just like
stammered
broccoli.
Like
broccoli.
And I also will have you know that now every year at that conference, we have something on financial analytics and all that. Yeah. You're welcome. That was the broccoli presentation that brought that to the forefront.
So if anybody's listening has no clue what we're talking about, we don't either. So
going back to
true. Hopefully,
sadly, I actually got his point, and it was actually a decent one.
I apologize for the last 2 minutes of your life that was wasted listening to that. But
going back to your mistake, what did you learn from that? What was the biggest takeaway that you had? What did you change based on that?
The preparedness.
Okay,
preparedness and silence, and accepting the silence that. Some people just take that time to process the information, and I had mistaken the silence, and often do mistaken silence as something else.
Give additional explanation.
It's interesting. Yeah. I think all 4 of our mistakes now are due to lack of preparation.
Yeah. Well, that's possible. Yeah. Trad, don't you use a saying something about poor preparation performance?
Poor performance, yeah. So my bad firing situation happened, and so there was a lot of lessons learned out of it. But we at the time had a smaller organization and a smaller office, and so let's say there were 12 people involved in the company at the time, and we were all operating inside of a 2,000 square foot space. So out of courtesy, or what we expected to be courtesy for people that we had to let go, we did not perform the termination at our office. We would typically do it, somewhere else.
Jerry Maguire style, take them to a public space.
Yeah. And there were a lot of lessons learned out of this, right? But
you didn't go for lunch.
No, it wasn't. It was worse. It was worse. And the challenge that we had with this particular thing was we failed. I guess I don't want to get too much into the failure part, but what we did is we went to the individual's home to do the termination because he also had a van
vehicle, yeah,
and so we needed to retrieve it. And minor miscalculation.
So this guy was in bed, just like having a nap. He just walked into his room, tapped him on the shoulder. Oh, by the way,
no, he was ready for the day. He was getting to his van. But the minor miscalculation was that I guess the kids were out of school that day, so the family was there.
Oh God!
Yeah. No, it was bad. It was real bad. And
what?
Man,
what part of you thought this would be a good idea?
All of the lack of preparedness part.
Okay.
But the situation had to be handled, right? It had gone on long enough, but that was definitely not the way that the reputation that I wanted to go down. That was definitely not what we were trying to accomplish. But we were there. It was done. Like we were in the middle of it. The lessons learned from that situation, because he had to get his personal belongings out of van, and I had to drive the van away. It's just not a good look at all, and it was definitely not what I wanted to have happen. But it was another permanent lesson that I picked up. And that was on no one should ever be fired by surprise. Like that is ultimately my responsibility. That was one that I just, it was gut wrenching that I had to learn the lesson that way. But I think from a employer standpoint, you think the surprise is better because there's going to be less blowback or whatever. Like you're just trying to get it done and not have a lot of repercussions around it. And that's definitely not the case because you're talking about humans and human feelings. And so, it completely changed. After I walked away from that situation, I said, I'll never, ever do that again. That will never happen as long as I'm involved in this organization. And so the shift on that is a major repurpose of communication and conversation with employees. When we have an issue, when something's going wrong, we are having an initial conversation as fast as possible. Here's what we see. Here's the corrective actions that need to happen. And we're going to be back in 30 days to see where we're at.
And these are the outcomes. I always add that on there too. Yeah, for sure.
And if we can't do that, then here's what we're going to have to do. And we meet back in 30 days. Okay, here's our progress, or here's our not progress. We've got in 2 weeks, we've got the final decision that's got to be made. And so we're building a series of 2 to 3 meetings before. And what we found since we started doing that is most of the time a person, if they they've decided in that period that they do not have an intention of making that adjustment or change. And so they will typically quit. And that gives them enough time to find a job. That gives them enough time to walk out with, on good terms or better terms. And it's a completely different exit strategy. And man, it impacted me so much.
Oh man,
that it changed all of that. And Dave Ramsey is very prominent in this. I think I read the book after this happened. Yep. Entree Leadership talks about employees should never
be
surprised whenever they're let go. When they walk in the room for that final conversation, you say, "Hey, we had this conversation," and they say, "Yep, I know what the consequences are." Like that should be the way that it happens. And I did not do that. And so it's been something that I've had to carry for quite some time because that's not something that you want to repeat, but it is something that it was again, another impactful transition for us.
Yeah. It's a scar. It's a scar and it's a reminder.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've heard you say to me multiple times, like that employee shouldn't be surprised ever. And that's something that's played in my head when we're working through employee coaching is like, make sure that they're not surprised if we get to the point of letting them go.
Yeah. That's management, right? And I've said that before. Actually, I have a friend that, reaches out every once in a while. And I've actually talked to you guys about her. But she's new to management and she said, I'm in a situation where this isn't working with this person. And she said, well, this is what I want to do, but it's a big organization. So HR is saying, we have to go through the proper channels and, there's all of this. And she's saying like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, well, my opinion is you either coach them up or coach them out, right? It's one or the other.
Yep.
And, so this had gone on for a couple of months, and I said, just be clear and direct. And, this exactly what Chad was just saying, these are the expectations as we meet. These are the consequences, positive or negative.
Yeah.
And, finally it had gotten to the course where, she'd kind of been coached out. And so she got the okay from HR, and, everything was ready, and she went to work and had the resignation letter on her desk.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Like that's good management in my opinion, is
coach them out or coach them out.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. And I would say the other big thing that I learned from all that is, in order for you to give somebody clear expectations on what you're asking them to do, it really puts the onus back on the manager or the leader to be able to say, here are the measurables. These are the things that I'm expecting. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be clear. It's got to be measurable. It can't be like, when I feel like you got it, when I feel like you're getting better. No, you've got to have something measurable around it. So
objective.
Correct.
Not subjective.
Yep. Yeah. They know what winning looks like in that situation. And man, it is the other big thing that we've learned through that is we've had some guys that, have been in the training cycle and they're just not getting it, or they just don't have the drive, that whole traction, GW, C, do they get it?
Want it, capacity. Yeah.
Capacity to do it. And so we have a conversation with them. Our team will now have a conversation with them on a Friday and say, hey, here's the deal. This is what we're seeing. This is the challenges that we've got. These are the good things that we see. We believe that you can make a shift in doing this, but you now have to make a personal decision if you want to do it. So today's Friday. Monday morning, you've got two choices. Show up with the want it and bring the energy to actually come and do the job and learn.
Yep.
Or you have an opportunity to not. That's your personal decision. You have the weekend to make that decision. And we've had both outcomes. People come in and say, man, thanks for the call to action. I'm here. Let's go get this. And we've had some people just say, okay, they'll walk in on Monday morning with their uniforms. Yeah. And that, again, you're just trying to do it with as much clarity as possible and as much honor as possible. And when I had that mistake, that's really kind of the thing, is it just felt like it wasn't done with honor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think something, and I was going to go and Tone, I don't know if you got another mistake, but I was going to piggyback on that one, Chad. And, I would say the vast majority in our industry for sure, and it's likely everywhere, but I can't obviously confirm that. We wait too long to make those decisions, right? Hiring apprentices, for instance, in our industry, we hire an apprentice, and that takes anywhere from a few months to a few years to actually get in the fold. But once you have enough experience, and it really helps if you have some objective data, but making that decision quicker. So there's more loss to no decision than there is to making the wrong decision. But having that conversation, Chad talked about his training, and we do that too. As soon as you get an indication that, this probably isn't going to work, chances are good it's not. And instead of waiting a year or 2 years down the road and spending a whole bunch of time in development, we just move on, because you're not doing yourself any benefit. You're not doing the company, and you're not doing them any benefit. If it's not going to work for them, they're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to be successful. If you're not successful, you don't enjoy it, right? So making that decision early, and having that conversation, setting clear expectations based on objective data, it's the way to do it. Tony, we're going to jump in.
I was literally going to say the exact same thing you did. That was kind of my mistake or learning experience per se, was doing the opposite. I guess I don't have a direct mistake other than not handling HR management and coaching an employee process proper. We tend to go one side or the other. Either we don't confront it with objective data, and we know that they're failing, but it's like, oh, we need them to do this, we need them to do that, we need them to do that, and then all of a sudden they end up with your company for an extra year, and then you finally get rid of them, and it's like, oh, why didn't we do this a long time ago? And for me personally, a lot of it was I wanted them to know they were gonna, I wanted them to have that objective data, but I couldn't figure out how to make it tangible, and I couldn't actually figure out how to set those clear expectations. And it was just like, I don't want to get rid of them and have them be surprised, but I also don't know how to make them not surprised. And I was almost afraid of giving them that direct feedback. And then people just stick around longer than they should.
You don't want to be mean.
Right.
That's it. You don't want to be mean. You don't want to be a jerk. So,
and And then one time we did
pussyfoot
it
around, and
one time we did it the other direction, and I remember a manager specifically calling me and saying, "We need to get rid of this person," and they're not going to improve. And I was just like, "All right, go do it." And it was similar to the situation Chad mentioned. And the guy was totally surprised, and our team sat there and had to listen to him basically berate them for. I wasn't involved in the process, but our team had to basically sit there and be berated for 30, 40 minutes while everyone gathered their stuff and got the ducks in a row. And it was it wasn't fair to that person.
Yeah.
But so overall, it's just we have learned now that to be very structured in coaching up or coaching out. Those the exact words I was thinking of, and making sure that you do it quickly. Like you said, we've had, when you bring on new hires, that we're training them, all the same stuff you guys have talked about, making sure that you're decisive with what you're doing with employees, but also fair. And finding that balance, I think, is the tough thing. It's really easy to just make the quick decision. It's really easy to just let them linger. And if you do either of those, they're very detrimental. So,
yeah, it's wild. I've gotten advice previously on similar, don't give a whole lot of reasoning, don't give a whole lot of justification. Just it's Tuesday and we've decided to go a different direction and shut up. And I've done that before and I hated it. Not because I hate the silence, but I feel like, there was this shift at a point where I said, I actually care about the people that we've employed and I want them to be successful. If they can be successful inside of our organization, then that's awesome. If they cannot be here, then I want them to be successful somewhere.
Yes.
And so I have kind of shifted a lot on that, where if I'm involved in that termination, there's obviously been multiple conversations leading up to that point. And then when we do the final termination, I will say to them, I know this may not feel like the time that you would want to hear this advice, but here are the reasons why we don't think that you're a fit here. And here are the things that I think that you should probably work on as you look for your next place of employment. And, they may do something with it. They may not. I remember talking to this one kid that was here, and he actually had put in his notice, and I was talking to him. One of his challenges was that he, had a challenge with being consistent in his performance, right? Great kid, super smart, high energy, all that stuff, just lacked consistency. Yeah. And, my piece of advice to him was, the only thing that I would tell you as you move on to your next thing is until you find a sense of purpose for yourself and a sense of consistency, you're going to constantly be chasing the next opportunity, and you're going to sit at each job for 12 months or less. Yep. And, it's just trying to, again, hope, and I've stayed in connection with him, and he's found success in other areas. But the concern is that you just let somebody go and then say, yep, well,
if you want to actually improve the person, and Lars, I remember you actually giving me input on this about, by the time you're letting them go, if you're trying to explain to them why you're letting them go, they're going to be emotional. They're not going to remember it. I remember you specifically saying, you'll tell people, if you want to talk more about this, call me tomorrow. I'll talk to you then.
Exactly what I was going to say. I'm short and direct at the time because I just believe it's highly emotional. But after the fact, give me 2 days. We'll talk about it.
But also, if you've done it properly, you shouldn't need to explain it. I think, Chad, you've said this, you've had times where you walk in the room and people know why they're getting fired because they know if you coach them properly, when you sit down to let them go, they should know exactly why they're getting let go, and you shouldn't have to explain it. And frankly, it should be relatively peaceful because they might know it's coming.
Yeah.
And
so Tony, your mistake that you had on the firing was the same thing, just the surprise?
It wasn't. It was a series of mistakes, and the series of mistakes were just not handling employees properly. And in my case, it was more so letting people stick around too long.
Yep.
And then one time trying to revert and actually flipping the opposite direction and not finding that sweet spot.
Yeah. We hold on too long because we don't want to be mean. And we have to get ourselves in the mindset that you're not doing them a favor.
Yeah, you end up wasting their time. We've had a couple employees that I've kept around way too long. And, finally you have to let them go.
It's, again, in Moneyball, you're going to be successful. You're a good kid. You're a good athlete in Moneyball. But it's just not going to be with us.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's basically what I've learned to say.
So
you do.
We had a whole episode here on firing practices. So what's our third major mistake that we've had? Because in the last episode, we kind of talked about business decisions that went awry. This is firing. What's the final kind of third mistake that you would say has been an impactful one that's shifted your mindset on something in your life or your business?
Tony, you've got a list of
Yeah.
divergences from correct. I know you don't call them mistakes, but
Well, it's not that I don't make mistakes. It's that I don't remember them. Like I literally, like I can't think of these point in time. Like I
Do
have.
we need to call Greta?
What's up?
Do we need to call Greta?
I mean, that would be fun.
So Greta's so nice though that she would say, "Oh no, Tony's so fine."
yeah, like Tony, I've got 40 or 50 things that you've done wrong.
Yeah,
this week.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
You want to discuss this? Yeah.
Yeah, but I just don't dwell on them. For me, see, I wasn't thinking about this as mistakes. It was what would I do differently, lessons learned. So
you came up with the topic of the biggest mistakes that you've made.
No, Lars came up with a topic of mistakes made, and I put a tweak on it. Yes.
Oh, okay. So what was your lesson? Give us our
decision making.
Okay, that does sound bad.
No, being better at it, not making decisions.
Yes. Okay, you're getting closer. Do you want to
expound?
Do you want to extrapolate that? Or actually, that was good, Tone. Thanks for that.
I thought we were just teasing it.
No. This is the final round.
You'll know if he's wanting a teaser because he'll say, "Give me a teaser." That's the indication.
It's all right, guys. This is just our 18th or 19th episode. We're working out the bugs.
Well, that's because you guys don't follow the same plan. You just kind of do whatever you want when you start, and then it's just, try to pick up.
Correct. We're wrong. You're not. But you were saying being indecisive. Being indecisive was a challenge for you, and you learned something out of it.
Okay.
I think
So in general, I struggled with trusting my gut instinct. And what I typically try to do is figure out what everyone else wants to do, and then I get confused because everybody wants a different thing, and then my gut gets forgotten. So in general, I tend to I think getting people's input is a valuable thing, and
got to remember the gut.
Yeah, I never forget your gut. I mention it almost every time I see you.
Arms crossed again.
Arms crossed, and he's
getting angry.
Floundered. So you take in too much information. Is that what you mean? Like you take in too much, and then you're indecisive because you can't. You have.
I actually don't think he was trying to be sarcastic there.
I'm not.
He was
I'm actually.
I thought he was saying you had to ask too many questions and then you get confused.
Yeah, if I was going to be sarcastic, I would say, so you take in all the information, then you ask Chad. And
a lot of times I have an idea of what I want to do, and then I seek input or seek out other information. And in my case, I care about people being bought into what we're doing.
Right.
I typically get a lot of opinions from people.
Right.
And then my initial gut instinct gets lost in their opinions.
Right.
And a lot of times then that leads to indecision because I want to please everybody and say, okay, well, I want all people on our leadership team to have buy-in on this, and I want to only do it if there's a consensus, and then that just leads to indecision and wasted time, and it leads to it leads to a lot of stagnation. So what I have found is that it leads to when we do make a decision, people are bought into it, but it leads to not enough decisions being made.
Right.
And what that comes down to is less about me knowing what to do and more me getting influenced too much and caring, this sounds weird, caring too much what others think. Mm-hmm. So I think what I've tried to do going forward, and this is actually more of a recent development, is make it clear in my head what I want to do, and then gather the input, but move forward with what my maybe somebody presents good logic and changes my gut instinct, but being more confident in my decision making abilities and trusting my gut. So
yeah, and that as you become more experienced, that probably just makes it easier. Trusting yourself, and that's part of entrepreneurship in general. And people ask me what I do for a living. I usually spout off something about I'm a doorknob salesman. That's what I do. What internally what I think I provide is I make decisions. I make decisive decisions based on half-ass, incomplete information all the time. And I take what I believe to be right and I go with it because I'd rather make that decision than not.
Right. Where I originally struggled was I started in this industry and knew nothing about it. So I was relying on people to make informed decisions, but then it got into a situation where I actually somewhat knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then got caught with okay, this person's telling me this person's telling me this. And then it just led, it first started out as I need your help with what I should do. And then it turned into I know what I should do, but I want you to be bought into this. And all of a sudden I'm not making any decisions because there's too too much input. So it started with an information gathering of I need to learn, and it turned into I want everyone to have a consensus.
Yeah, I fully believe the wrong decision is better than no decision. It's just we make a decision and we move on.
Yep.
So that's good. That's good, Tone.
Yeah.
Chad, I'm staring at you.
Oh, I couldn't see where your eyes were focused on. The final one that I'm going to share, as I've narrowed my list of 15 down, is you reminded me of it earlier. When you were sharing your story with your uncle.
Yeah.
This was 11 years ago. I had chosen to take our team to a locksmith convention on the same day as my 10th wedding anniversary. And it sounds stupid now, but my logic around
that was with your ex-wife?
No, it was with my current wife.
Who's a saint, I might add.
She is.
She
for many
has
reasons.
to be.
For many
yes,
reasons.
Anyone that knows Chad would know
least,
that Jessica is an absolute saint.
Yes. So what the reason that I bring it up is, it was this moment of kind of a career decision that I was trying to think, I need to invest time with my team to advance my team, and my anniversary, we can celebrate it today.
They happen every year
or the next day. Yeah.
And
I minimize the impact on my personal relationship over a business decision. And so, the challenge with it was obviously that was a bad decision. I will say, but it has transformed the way that I process things, that I have processed things for the long term. I have to show up for my family. I have to show up for my spouse. Right? She is my biggest encourager, and is really going to be there when employees are going to come and go, when the business is going to have its ups and downs. Right? That's the people that you need to invest in, and then obviously my family with my kids. And I've read these stories, and you read any biography of a very successful business individual, and their personal life is just in shambles, right? And so you go back and go, well, is it what is the primary and what's the priority? And I want to have a successful business. I want to have a successful career, but I also don't want to lose my family over the career. So what is the balance point? And maybe my career goals and ambitions are tailored and tempered as the kids are growing up, and I have to put effort over here for this amount of time because of the kids' age or what have you. And that has been a big eye opener for me. It was early on, business was number one priority and the family was second priority, and I had to shift that alliance where the business was still going to be here and things were going to happen, and I was going to give it a lot of priority. But when I had to make that decision between business and family, I had to start making the family decision, or the family the priority. And it was a big lesson that I learned through that whole process.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's again another one of those gut punches where you question life, question who you are, and
that's a good one. That's a good one. You mentioned business biographies. I'm currently reading the Steve Jobs one, and his personal life. Wow, I always knew he was a bit of a maniac, but oh boy.
Well, you look at that. You look at Elon Musk. You look at Phil Knight. All of these guys, they just had. Albert Einstein. Yeah. If you ever read the biography on Albert Einstein, his personal life was just a disaster. He accomplished amazing things, but at what cost on the people that he was interacting with? So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind. As long as you make that decision, right? That's what it is. It's not necessarily that one is more important than the other. If you want to dedicate your life to business, that's fine too.
Sure. Yeah.
But just understand that that is an active decision.
Yes.
And some of those guys that you mentioned, I know, like Phil Knight, Shoe Dog book, right? That was an active decision. It wasn't until afterwards, that he decided, okay, I'm going to now change my focus. And I think that's when they went public eventually. And so, do we got time for another mistake here, or are we hitting the clock?
Well, you need your one more.
Oh, okay.
Right. Take us home.
Take us home with a big old fat screw up. Perfect. So about, I'm going to say 4 years ago, we'd grown, we'd had about 60, I've got a couple screw ups in mind here.
Mm-hmm. 4 years ago was about COVID time.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think what I want to share more.
Because there was a lot there.
Yeah, I'm going to say 4 years ago.
Okay.
I'll start with this one because I have had a couple partnerships that in business that are no longer.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned quite a bit through that process. But I think the direction I want to go is just with the team, because I think it's pretty important for anyone that's in a position like ours, as well as anyone that's looking to grow into that leadership role. So I'm not a technical person. I will say that. I've never pinned a lock. I've never cut a key. I don't know how any of that stuff works. And my explanation has always been that I don't want to have an excuse to jump into that if it's needed, because that's a natural tendency. So I've intentionally stayed away from the technical side, which means I focus all my energy and my attention into building the business. Okay. And working on the business. And what do I do for a living? I actually just walk around and, answer questions and provide experiences that I've had and, hope to help my management team grow. That's kind of what I do. But by doing that, I thought, okay, so my technical group, so half of our company are guys in the field. They weren't really under my purview. They weren't like my guys, right? Like we all worked together, but I didn't have the same commonalities with them. And so, we hired people to manage them, and I didn't really focus on it. My mistake there was it started to, we started to grow apart. I didn't have as much commonalities with the technical guys. I didn't have the relationship with them.
Sure.
And it really kind of eroded our culture and really eroded that feeling, so that it was more of like I don't want to say us versus them, but I wasn't that like unifying leader at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I was more, just that kind of vacant CEO kind of idea that you never really see or hear from. And it really showed. And, the culture started eroding. We started losing good people. Some of our top performers, resigned, moved elsewhere, because there just wasn't that unified kind of vision. And while I thought that was me focusing on what I'm good at, I had to understand. And now I look at it and realize that, if you are in that role as CEO or whatever, ownership, you have to be that unifying person that brings everything together. And it can be a challenge, certainly depending on your personality. But, I took that to heart, and, it was like from a feedback survey from our staff. It was, ownership has to be more present, I think was the feedback. And I thought,
which is a tough thing to balance, because like we've talked about, you want to be delegating, you want to be focused on that vision. And like we, have said in other concepts, you can easily flip to the other side. You don't want to be too hands-on, but you don't want to be absent. And finding that middle ground
but you can delegate things, and it actually frees you up to be better engaged, because I think that's one of the big things, right? You get so head down into the business of the business, and you don't really know what it is that you're doing.
Right.
Outside of that,
I was busting my ass every day, like working 8-10 hours. And the more I did that, the worse our business got.
Yeah. Because you weren't present. You were working too much.
Yeah. Because of the role
your own stuff. Yeah.
I was in, I was working so much to make everyone's lives better in my mind, but really what makes their lives better was my presence and sitting there. And so, what I've done is
that's an extreme
statement. I mean, I'm talking theoretical here, but
they wanted the owner to sit there. The fact that it was
they wanted somebody
kind of actually.
But I've started doing something intentional about this. So on virtually every morning, except when I'm sitting here with you pinheads, I'm at the shop and I show up early, and don't do anything. I sit right square in the middle of the warehouse with all the guys around me, and we just, BS. We just talk about whatever music, video games, and just be part of the guys, say good morning to everyone, slap hands, that kind of thing, and really try and build that kind of culture and feeling with
like Canadian thing, slap hands.
It's like,
high five.
Oh, okay.
Slap hands.
Okay.
I
Definitely
think
a
dap up,
Canadian
the kids call it. Yeah, so we dap. But it's really just trying to mesh both sides of the technical and the non-technical side. And if you're not in a technical industry, I would say the crucial revenue generators, the crucial part of your business, being present in that, even if that's not necessarily your role.
Yeah.
So it was, every Tuesday morning I go to Tim Hortons, which is a coffee shop here in Canada, and I get donuts and I get coffee, and I bring them in myself personally. I pay for it myself personally, and I bring that in because it's a reminder to me that my job is actually, to provide for these guys, and it's an active service.
Yep.
That they dedicate their lives to our company, and and this is the least I can do. So it was a pretty big lesson for me, and it was 2020, so there's a lot of other things going on, so I could rationalize it and make excuses, but it was a huge mistake. We lost a lot of time, a lot of growth. It was so that's a big lesson for me.
Yeah, it's wild. The COVID era, the pandemic, really, it probably could be a whole episode on things that changed in our business because of that, for the positive, because that was an incredible time frame of learning and growing, and just kind of a reshift in the entire organization. So, well, guys, we got through it.
Yeah.
3 mistakes, really. Me and Lars had mistakes, and Tony just kind of had minor slip-ups. But
many minor slip-ups that lead to a grand mistake.
So during this whole process, Tony has been curating in his mind what topic we're going to be talking about next.
That's kind of funny you say that, because that is actually what happened. Usually I try to prepare ahead of time and completely forgot this time. So anyways, I was thinking back to what Uncle Glenn said to us.
Do you want a drum roll, Tom?
No drum roll. So,
okay.
Glenn sent us an email the other day, and he was talking about how he surprisingly enjoyed listening to our podcast, and he talked about learning habits and how people
he was
learn.
Talking about me, but okay.
You would hear that, yes. He was talking about learning and how people learn in different, at different ages, you learn in a different manner. And I think what he talked about was that when you're an adult, a lot of times the best way you learn is through mistakes and trial and error. And I think these episodes here highlight that a little bit. And I want to latch onto that topic of learning. And the next week's episode is going to be on learning to learn. What are you doing to learn? Are you reading? Are you joining peer groups, business coaches? How are you as a CEO learning? And we're going to, learn to learn.
How to learn as a CEO.
Oh, I said
Chad,
learning to learn.
Like,
you took your title, but
learn to learn.
Learn
that
to
was
learn.
Like Tony's
learning
lots
to learn.
of locks.
My alliteration. I like alliteration. Okay.
I think that's your.
I like alliteration and analogies. Everyone knows that.
Well, that's what we'll try to tackle next time, guys. It was a blast chatting about failures and mistakes with you guys.
I love hearing about your mistakes.
Yeah,
guys.
we could do this one like every week. We could
air all of our dirty laundry and get it all figured out. All right, so we'll do that again. We'll learn to learn in our learning episode as we learn next on the learning episode of the Unlocked Podcast.
Thursday on Unlocked Podcast.
Subscribe and check out our website, unlockedpodcast.com. See you guys. Be safe.